Hello, everyone, and welcome to your Niagara Falls experience.
Yes. Getting used to where this camera is.
That's the camera.
We seem out of proportion, don't we?
I'm all the way back here. See, I'm in the river. You're in front of the river.
Oh, am I?
Yeah.
Okay.
See, you're in the horseshoe. I'm kind of in the bridal.
Oh, that
heading
makes
for the bridal
sense.
veil.
Yeah, Horseshoe Fall is also known as the Canadian Fall.
Even though it's,
Yeah. You guys are just jealous, but Canadian Fall. But hey, welcome. It's it's winter, and I've been out doing tours and in this weather. And today I had a couple from Germany and hardy people. They got out in the cold. They had a great time. And I will tell you though, I can go out all year on tours, but what Nico does for a living in the tourism industry is intense. We don't talk about it just out of sake of protecting.
We don't talk about Bruno, no. Yeah, I'm what we call the seasonal. So there's two types of workers here in the wonder that is Niagara Falls, especially Niagara Falls, USA, but also in Canada. But there's seasonal work and there is year-round work. And the way it kind of works is if you are year-round, it's usually you still deal with peak season, but your hours are usually a little different. If you're a seasonal worker, you want to bank as much as possible, meaning that I get to crank out those 13-hour days in July. But that being said, with all those people and all those wonderful, wonderful people in 90-degree temps, at least I'm not outside in, what is it going to be, -20 on Friday?
We went out the tour today. It was 18 degrees. And it was, it's cold. I mean, we don't do a tremendous amount of walking, but when you park in Lot 1 at the Niagara Falls State Park, and you walk down to the observation center, and the wind at the observation center is cold.
Yes.
So the last few days have been quite brutal because of the colder weather, but people enjoy it. They love Niagara Falls. Behind me is a scene that we took at the falls today. Yes. No, that's a green screen. But
it's a lot. Wow, I guess the groundhog said early spring. That's a lot of green behind me.
Right. Hey, if you want to call in and give us your take on Niagara Falls, telephone number is 716-957-5258. So that's 716-957-5258. And we have a math problem going on. 716-957. Julian's putting in the phone number for us. It'll pop up in a minute. 5258.
Or if you're watching this live on either YouTube or Facebook, specifically Facebook, because that's where we check our comments. So if you're watching us, which you hopefully are, hello, viewers. Welcome to your Niagara Falls experience. As always, I am Nico the American. This is Peter. He's Canadian, I think.
Canadian, eh? Absolutely.
Can't tell.
Red, white, and red.
It's funny because I'm wearing the red, white, and blue here, and you're wearing the Canada, so we are fitting today. We are very
957-5258.
Yes.
That's our number. Call now. Operators are standing by.
We have operators?
Yeah. Yeah, we have trained monkeys.
I didn't think we could afford that. We don't have a budget, Peter.
Not yet. But can you imagine all the things that are happening that we're, folks, we're getting invitations to a lot of places. We're going to be talking about one of them later. But yeah, there's a lot happening in Niagara Falls. And we're going to start right now. Julian's going to bring up some pictures for us of that Nico took. When did you take these pictures?
So this was last Saturday. I went down, as I'm making fun of Peter for being out in the cold, I went down to the state park myself for a nice walk. And the visitor center, there's a lovely photo of the new Niagara Falls Welcome Center being built right at Prospect Point in Niagara Falls State Park. This is very exciting. They've been working on this. They demolished the old Oren Lemon Visitor Center at the end of 2021, and through all of 2022 they started doing the construction work, and they have finally put the glass walls up on the brand new visitor center. This is a new development. They are projecting, the original projections was spring of this year, so hopefully we are going with spring of this year.
Spring.
Spring. Speaking of spring, tomorrow is Groundhog Day. Now, they've already asked the Buffalo Betty or Buffalo whatever, the Buffalo one.
We don't have a groundhog. That's a traffic cop. A meter maid. I don't know.
Apparently, it's from what I heard, it's 6 more weeks of winter. Which, of course, it is. What, you want spring? We don't get spring. We get winter, slush, second winter, that weird day when it's 78 inexplicably, third winter, and construction. Those are your settings.
That is so true. And so, Groundhog Day tomorrow. Now, who's the big one in the States? Is it Punxsutawney Phil?
It's Punxsutawney Phil. No, the real one is, if you head over to my personal Instagram page, every year we ask Niagara Norbit if he sees a shadow. And it's very great because he's not a groundhog, nor is he alive.
Well, there's something to be said for taxidermy. Well, in Canada, we have Wyerton Willie. And so we go by Wyerton Willie. And Wyerton's up mid-province in Ontario, but that's who we rely on.
What is summer in Canada?
The best day of the year. There you go. Now, we also have a somber observance today, and Nico brought it up when we went through our pre-show. Go ahead.
So today is actually, and I am wearing the lapel pin, the 20th anniversary of the Columbia disaster, where unfortunately the Columbia space shuttle broke up upon re-entry. It was this day, February 1st, 2003. And for someone, I was born after the Challenger disaster, but I was alive during the Columbia disaster. So I distinctly remember that. And it was sort of, the space shuttle continued for a little bit longer, but that really stopped space exploration, at least for the States, for a considerable length of time. We are now looking with the Artemis mission to go back to the moon, which is really exciting. And one of the things I did want to mention as I'm looking at this, somber occasion, I've actually been down to Kennedy Space a couple times, and there's a section, they have the Space Mirror, which is dedicated to those who lost their lives in the pursuit of space travel from all over the world. And it's a really cool, it's a giant,
powerful
polished
thing.
black mirror with their names.
Every death was a step towards growth and exploration.
And that's just it. But down in Kennedy Space, there's actually, they have, there's a hallway, and it's, the Lost Astronaut hallway. And on one side is some personal items from the Challenger crew, and on the other side is the Columbia crew. And then you turn the corner, and there is a piece of the Challenger's fuselage. Oh. And then the window frames of the Columbia, because oddly enough, there's a lot more material of the Challenger because of the way it broke up.
Right.
You would think based on the Y cloud and things. But Columbia burned on re-entry, so that was quite disturbing.
I watched it when I was home with my daughter, had just been born, and we were in our bedroom early Sunday morning. We had the news on, and it was showing it. It was very painful to watch, as was the Challenger. I'm not just Julian. How old am I? Julian?
As old as the dawn of time.
Right. As old as the dawn of time. But I also remember, you go back through the history of the fallen, of the astronauts who sacrificed their lives. And I remember I was 8 years old when Apollo 1 burned on the platform, where they were doing a test, and there was a spark, and the oxygen-rich atmosphere in this enclosed capsule burned up and killed Gus Grissom, Roger Chaffee, and trying to remember the other one, and forgive me for not remembering it. But yeah, I grew up watching that, seeing the Challenger, and then I did have a chance to meet astronauts from the Canadian program when I was at a school in Toronto. They were teaching the astronauts how to do video in space, and I happened to meet several of those, Hatfield, trying to remember his first name, and also Chris Hadfield, and Julie Payette. I always thought that was funny. She had this very curly hair, and she was up in space, and it was huge.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to have a good hair day, but all these astronauts risked it. And yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, though, because it was a powerful experience. They learned a lot from it, and we do make mistakes, and we have to remember that, mistakes in this case are, there's
Grissom,
Ed
White, and
White,
Chafin
so it was pretty
three
good.
from Apollo
Sorry,
1.
Ed White, but we observe that day. We remember that as humans, we make mistakes, and it doesn't deter us from still aspiring to what we're doing, but we have to learn. So,
That's
God, rest in peace to all the astronauts.
But one of those things, and obviously, I don't want to be like, well, let's segue to Niagara here, but it does hit a little bit close to home here in Niagara because Niagara has a long history with spaceflight. Specifically this region, if you ever head over to the Niagara Aerospace Museum, which hopefully sometime in the future we can get over there.
Yes.
Niagara was critical to a lot of early spaceflight. The X-1 was built by Bell Aerospace here in Wheatfield, New York, and that is the plane that allowed Yeager to break the sound barrier.
Cool.
And then you have, they actually built a lot of the modules for the lunar lander. They built the training system for the lunar landing module was built in Bell Aerospace. Moog, also located here in Western New York, built a lot of the pieces for the space shuttle, including Columbia. So there is, and now with Moog, Bell is no longer existing. Bell's actually been absorbed by Moog, oddly enough. So Moog is still around here. And Moog is still working with NASA on the current Artemis program, and they were looking at the area around Wheatfield to a few different companies were looking around our airfields because they are looking to start building pieces for experimental space planes and the Artemis program back to the moon and things. So Niagara is still very much involved in the space program in one way or another.
Good.
Which is really kind of cool.
Big part of our history.
And it's something that we don't really talk about here in Niagara Falls. Like, most people don't even realize there is a Niagara Aerospace Museum sitting in the airport.
A lot of people don't know we have an airport with the third longest runway in New York State.
That's it. I mean, and you realize it was built that long for multiple reasons. One was because we were building these experimental aircrafts that, and two was we have an airbase. People forget we have an airbase until they get here. I'm like, yeah, we got an airbase. We got a lot here.
One of those giant planes. They're gas stations.
Yeah.
They're air refueling wings, yeah. So, somber but powerful reminder that we are humans. We will continue to try, even in the face of adversity and error. And I know some errors were made that day. And I've heard good things about some of the lessons learned. So that was, but I'm glad you brought it up, like I said. A good thing to remember because there was an Israeli pilot on that shuttle.
Ilan Ramon.
Ramon, yeah.
And it was interesting. I love he had spoken with his, and I'm going to get this quote very wrong, so I'm just not going to say the quote. But he was asking, like, how do you celebrate the Sabbath? How do you observe the Sabbath in space? Because every 17 minutes is another sunrise, and every so many minutes is another Sabbath, and every 15 days is Rosh Hashanah. And it's like he actually said that, and I remember that was one of those interesting lines because you realize and most astronauts when they go up there, they come down and look and they realize just how the world is so small in the grand scheme of things, and being up there and looking at this, your perspective, and that's a lot of people, I love Kennedy's speech when he's saying, why we need to go to the moon, and, it's, why some say the moon, why climb the highest mountain, why does Rice play Texas, we do these things not because they're easy, because they're hard. It's a challenge we're willing to accept and one we're not going to postpone. It was seen as a challenge, but it was also seen as something that was valuable to humanity.
Yes.
And that's a lot of space with the International Space Station is really, international cooperation. It's world cooperation. It's being out there and looking down at this planet and realizing that, we're all living right. We look at these we look at Canada and the U.S. That doesn't show up when you're out.
It transcends
up in space.
borders.
You're just looking at, it's all the world. It's right there, which is just really, really cool.
That great way to put it. Thank you. And that segues into our discussion about. Well, first of all, I'm going to talk about a Canadian site, and Julian's going to bring up the the horticulture and butterfly thing for me.
Ooh,
it's a
butterflies.
video. Yes. So this is a series of photos I've taken while I'm there. And first of all, we're going to see the butterfly conservatory. So when you're ready, Julian, kill the phone number. So there's the butterfly conservatory on the Niagara Parkway. And a butterfly. They have so many butterflies, many different species. What's interesting is, as beautiful as they are, they tend to blend in with things. I think that's a repeat picture, but they do blend in almost as if they're part of the oh, my microphone is loose. So, and they put out, this is funny, they put out orange slices. I always think of Ant-Man and Captain America. Anyone got some orange slices? That's my daughter Maddie 10 years ago holding a butterfly. You don't touch them, but you let them land on you. And she did, and as you can see, one landed on her nose at the same time. Now this is the School of Horticulture. It's right next door to the Butterfly Conservatory. It is an actual school. It's a 3-year program. The students who attend it live on campus for the first 2 years. They've got beautiful housing near these greenhouses. But what they do is, their classroom are the Niagara Falls, the Niagara Parks Botanical Gardens. This is in Queen Victoria Park near the Skylon Tower. That's the Botanical Gardens. That's their classroom.
That is so cool. And could you imagine, well, you can imagine, you're Canadian, but like, could you imagine just, oh, your classroom is Niagara Falls.
Oh,
Here
exactly.
you go, it's right here. You get to do, all of the flower design for Niagara here.
Pardon me.
It's really, really cool.
Yeah, as you can see, right. Oh, there we are. I was going to make fun of that. But that was the Niagara School of Horticulture, which their classroom and their main building is right next to the Butterfly Conservatory. Canada has a very strong dedication to the floral arrangements that beautify their parks. And everything from down at the floral clock that you saw at the end, right up past the falls themselves to Dufferin Islands, is beautifully maintained. They have flowers. They plant 350,000 tulip bulbs in the fall, and they bloom in the spring, and it's quite the sight. And I remember going last May with my friend David from Niagara Regional Tours, and I couldn't believe the orange tulips that I got pictures of. So I think one picture got in there. So yeah, we'll post that video on our site. And that is something you can go to. They do have greenhouses, and the Butterfly Conservatory is enclosed year-round. They release new butterflies every day. If you go, wear something colorful. Because that's, as you saw, my daughter had this, I called it a watermelon dress with different pinks and reds, but she couldn't get them off her. One on her nose, one on her back, one on her hand. So, yep, in the Canadian side, that is something I highly recommend, and we will be visiting it. And we'll see how the butterflies taste.
Ooh.
All you can eat. No.
See, now I understand why they're harder to see in the foliage. They're hiding from you, Peter.
Well, they hide well. And nature itself, I mean, when I was 5 years old, I was at Point Pelee, which is the southernmost point of Canada. And then we were camping there, and I found a walking stick. I'd never seen one. Now, I was 5 years old, so it's not a surprise, but, nature hides itself. It adjusts and adapts to the things around it. So that's part of the experience. When you're at Niagara Falls, you're not just at a waterfall. You're at a place where they decorate the waterfall on both sides. I know the state park does a very good job of their landscaping as well.
Yes, they do. And one of the things, just since we're talking about butterflies, and it just got me thinking about, we have a theme. See, we talked about space flight and planes, and now we're talking about butterflies. I want to talk about birding real quick, just because I just realized it is February, and this is kind of peak winter birding season for Niagara Falls. And a lot of birders come here in right around February. Just because you're kind of approaching some birds' it's nesting season. Some of them are traveling back. You get a lot of winter birds, and there's been a lot of birding travel, and the state park interpretive program has been doing nature walks and like birding walks that you can sign up for on the Niagara Parks. It's the Niagara Falls, I think it's New York State Park Regional Interpretive Program. Something. it's a big long mouthful. I just got Niagara Falls State Park.
You'll find it.
Niagara Falls State Park and the other ones around it. It's part of the New York State Park Interpretive Program. But they're really cool, and they have these guided hikes and trails, and a lot of it right now is focusing on bird watching. Niagara Falls has the most species of gull-winged bird anywhere in the world.
Yep.
And I remember just one time I was down at the park, and I spent a day, and it was just a complete fluke. I spent a day with this woman who came down. She was sitting near, like, the crow's nest. And at the time, the crow's nest wasn't. This was during COVID.
The crow's nest is at right by Maid of the Mist, beside the American Falls.
Yes, so it's a set. In fact, they're actually going to build it all the way up to Prospect Point. So they're working on that. So it's probably going to be closed again. But back during COVID, it was closed. The state had not opened it, and this woman sat just next to the gate. And there's a set of benches down there, and she was sitting there, and she spent between up top and down below. She spent an entire day just bird watching.
Wow.
And she kept pointing out all these birds to me. Then, there was like goldfinches and things that I didn't even know were down there. And then, things that were up top. And it's weird because you see things down there that you don't see up top, and then you see things up top that you don't see down there. That 200-foot gorge is such a difference. And it was really kind of cool to see, there's always, for some reason, there's always cardinals, like, at the bottom of the gorge.
We saw them today,
There's and then they pop up top. But you're always seeing, like, cardinals, and occasionally you see blue jays, and you see goldfinches, and you see all of these really...
chickadees that land in your hand.
And so many seagulls. Oh. Technically, they're not seagulls because they're in the lake, so they're just gull-winged birds, but I'm going to call them seagulls because, I'm sorry, Audubon, I'm not a birder,
Well, in 1999, I was working in corporate convention work and tourism, meaning I handled groups that were here for conventions, etc., and I handled the North American Gull Conference, 1999. These were all enthusiasts about gulls, and they booked 6 buses moving all around, so there were all, small limited groups at each spot. But their biggest thing was they wanted to make sure they were connected by radio, that if one group found something unusual or rare, that the other groups could come as well. And it was fun. It was very interesting. They told me, and this may not be an actual fact, but I remember they said 23 of the 25 species of gull in the world come to Niagara Falls at least part of the year.
Yes, they do. And what's even more interesting is if you look at the Niagara Falls Observation Tower, and there is a plaque directly in front of it talking about birds. And the reason that plaque is there is when they were looking to remodel the observation tower in 2000, and so the RFP went out in like 2001, they worked on in 2002, was finished by 2003. But the original plan was the sides were going to be mirrored reflective. The new updated, because the original tower was taller than this one, it had that extra height, and it was clear glass, you could see through it. And they decided they cut the top of it and they were going to mirror finish it. And the reason they cut the top off really was, 1, for aesthetics, but 2, because it was a little too tall for the bird migrations.
Right.
But what they found, and a lot of the Audubon kind of chimed in, and a lot of different organizations chimed in and said, please do not make this a mirrored tower. These migratory birds will crash into it. Because they were already crashing into it when it was clear. If you made it mirrored, they're really going to hit it.
Oh, yeah.
So that is why if you look at our tower, it's designed with these very distinctive stripes going down it. It's this greeny blue color for the New York State Niagara Falls Observation Tower, and it has these stripes that break it up. And that is intentionally put in there so the birds will notice it, and it decreases the likelihood of bird strikes against the tower, so it doesn't interfere with the bird migrations.
Well, that's great to hear. Yeah.
And that was like, and these are the kinds of things that you learn because it's on a plaque in front of it that most people walk by. Why? And that's a lot of things in Niagara Falls State Park.
Oh, yeah.
Like, just stop and read the plaque. There's so much information on them.
Well, if you floss, you get rid of plaque. No. No, you're absolutely right, though. The plaques are very important. We can do a show where I actually have a collection of very obscure plaques around Niagara Falls. And that would be an excellent topic to have. Well, I think Julian's going to line up a commercial for us for our wine sponsor, our good friends at Victorianburg. This time of year, we haven't been there as much, But check it out. It's a lovely place, and we'll be back in about a minute and a half.
On the shoreline of Lake Ontario, just east of Wilson, New York, you'll find a sweet spot that combines old world charm with new world vintages. From the rustic elegance of their grounds to the warmth and enchantment of their tasting room, you'll feel a special welcome to Victorienburg Wine Estate, owned and operated by Victoria and Dan Hogue. Award-winning wine is available for tasting, or for a true adventure of pairing, you can savor the wide variety of award-winning chocolate truffles and their suggested wine partners. From the superb traditional wines to specialty vintages infused with chocolate or other delights, there's something for every palate. No setting on the wine trail can match this marriage of vintage and delicacy. Our tasting room is open daily, Sunday through Friday from noon until 5, and Saturday from 11 to 6. Acres of vineyards, patios, rhythmic fountains, and our rose garden entice you to stroll the grounds after tasting our award-winning wines. Find us at 4402 East Lake Road in Wilson, New York, or online at www.victorienburg.com.
I want to drink wine. They have really good wines. Niagara Wine Trail has excellent wines.
It does.
Yeah, and the customers, like, I get to work for two companies. Both of them are sponsoring us in many ways. 5-star Niagara Falls tours. Their specialty, in addition to regular tours, is military. In fact, a month ago, I had a Purple Heart winner who also won a Bronze Star after 4 tours over in Afghanistan or Iraq. And he and his family came up, and 5-star take care of the heroes like that. But they do a lot of programs for the military, and for military reunions, they do a program called Shock and Awe, which is Niagara Falls, all the power. So I get the pleasure of working with them and seeing all these things. So Victorienburg is one of my favorite places to stop, and Dan and Victoria, the owners, are just outstanding. But now, the other thing I wanted to, we were going to bring up, but this is more along the American side, is what were we going to do? What? Oh, the Herschel. The Herschel, that's right. No, the Herschel Carousel Museum has reached out to us, and we're going to go spend an evening there with Ian, their executive director.
Yes, we are. So this is I am very excited for this one. So if you are not familiar with the history of North Tonawanda, which...
Lumber City.
Exactly. There's a lot of cool history, and it's still... So people always stop there like, well, what else is there? And, they think Niagara Falls, and they kind of look in this little tiny box of just the waterfall, and we're done. And it's like, if you look at the greater community, so many things happening. Like we were just talking about aerospace and Wheatfield. But one of the biggest things is you had Lumber City, which was North Tonawanda. And because of that plentiful lumber, you had some fun with that carving of that lumber, which leads to things like Herschel carousels. Now, Herschel carousels was responsible for, and I pulled this directly from their website, so it is accurate.
Yeah, and Julian, you want to bring up the video for shortly.
Herschel Carousel was responsible from about the 1900s through the 1930s for making over 3,000 hand-carved carousels.
Wow.
And what was really cool is, and we're going to take a look right now. I'm going to stop talking so we can actually see a bit of this.
You can talk over
I'll talk over. I'll get back to it in a second. I just want you guys to see it. So. And why I wanted to stop talking for 1 second was my next point was going to be that a lot of these carousels ended up having Wurlitzer organs in them. And Wurlitzer organs were also made in North Tonawanda. So it was like the perfect thing. You could get your, circus organ, your carousel, your rides. They invented a lot of the rides you see in Kittylands. They lasted right through the 1950s. And what's really cool is of the 148 antique hand-carved carousels still in existence, 71 of them were made in North Tonawanda.
Wow.
So that's a significant amount. And what is really cool at the Herschel Carousel Museum is they have a lot of these vintage pieces, including the carousel, but also a lot of the Wurlitzer organ, the music reels, because they'd be paper punches that would play these organs. They have the organs that play, and you get to see all of these really interesting hand-carved pieces of, I don't want to say Americana, but it's Americana. It is a slice of that throwback to, America. It
America's
really is.
Heart and soul.
That idea. And so what we're very, very excited. So we're shooting probably, they're opening. Their season's supposed to be opening in about a month or two. So when they open up, we are going to be heading there, and we're going to be having a show there, which is really cool because I'm going to get to spend a lot of quality time around all of these vintage carousels.
And I've been putting together the soundtrack for it, a song called Will It Go Round in Circles. No, but I'm excited too because I take a lot of groups there. And they have a lovely gift shop. I always mention that, and people are like, oh yeah, go exit through the gift shop. But they choose gifts that really reflect the carousels and the beauty of it. That is part of the heart of America. It's the most simple thing in the world. You're going around in circles. But when you saw the pictures, I mean, I have hundreds of pictures of groups on the carousel, and people love it. They smile.
And that's just, one of the things I really enjoy about Niagara Falls, both on the Canadian side and the American side, is you could have serious experiences. You can, be very experienced in these deep emotional, the emotional bonds of. We talked about that last week with the Reverend. These deep, spiritual moments with the waterfall. But you can also just have a lot of fun.
Yes.
Niagara Falls, for as long as Niagara Falls has been this deep, the all-powerful waterfall, it's been a lot of fun, too. There's been, you can go ahead to Clifton Hill and, a bunch of,
Like a carnival.
That's it. And it's, Canada, Clifton Hill's basically like a year-round carnival.
Yep.
And then you come over to our side, and there's a lot of vintage. And one of the cool things right now is Niagara Amusement Park and Splash World, the former Fantasy Island over on Grand Island.
Yes.
They're opening for their 2023 season in May. I'm going to just announce I think it's either right before or right after Memorial Day. I'm excited for that. I've already paid for my season pass just so I can ride the Silver Comet. I rode it 6 times in a day last year, as soon as they opened it.
Welcome to Obsession.
After the 5th time, Vanessa, my girlfriend, looked at me and said, do not ride, grabbed my arm and said, don't do it. I know you get motion sickness and you just rode this 5 times. I said, Vanessa, I understand. You are absolutely correct, but I must do this. And then I spent the next 4 hours lying on the floor of the apartment, peeled out. I was done. Forget it. It's over. Because it was one too many times. Actually, so we just got a great comment from Mary asking if we'll ever do a show at the aquarium. And that is something, we would love to do it.
I can call Gary, the executive director.
That's it. We would love, I'd love the Aquarium of Niagara. It's so great.
For several years, I was their Santa Claus and their Easter Bunny. Yep.
I'd believe it.
The best part was I lived 4 doors up, so I would dress in the Easter Bunny costume and walk down the street in it. It was great.
And that's just it. I mean, so yes, like the aquarium and things. And we want to highlight everything. We want to highlight Niagara. And there's so many cool things in Niagara. One of the things I want to do, and it's not open because it's winter, but when summer comes along, maybe fall, I want to take you to the Buffalo Niagara Heritage Village.
Yes.
Out in Amherst. So it's just outside the range. Technically, you're in Erie County. Boo-hoo, I don't care. It's so
Western New York.
They have sheep. I love it.
Isn't that the place they did a Civil War reenactment every year?
I don't know if that's I'm not sure.
I think
they do that. I think they have a Civil War weekend there. They have they have blacksmithing weekends and all sorts of things. And it's cool because they're all of these different houses and schoolhouses and work things, and they were all from different parts of the region of Western New York, and they were all moved to the village because otherwise they would have been demolished. They were, in the way of progress. So they decided, well, why don't we put them all in one place? And they saved all these different buildings and put them around. And it's just a really cool place. And that's sort of the more you look around, and here's a great quote from one of our viewers. Hey, Brett, 5-star tours. He said, we take for granted all of the great stuff in and around Niagara Falls. If you step out and look for the good, it's there.
Yes.
And, thank you, Brett. That's it. If
That's
you look,
the company we were talking about, 5-star Niagara Falls Tours.
It's funny. We were talking about him. He's watching. Hi, Brett. But that's it. There's so much to do here, and there's so many cool things to see.
Yeah.
And what we really are trying to get to the heart of here is showing all of you that, and hearing about your experiences. So, if you have an experience, you have a favorite place that you like going to, let us know. Shoot us a comment here on Facebook.
Yes.
You can give us a call at 716, insert number here.
957-528-5258.
I'll never remember it. One of these days I'll remember that.
Look at that.
It'll be the time when phones become obsolete. I'll finally remember what our number is. It's the only number I remember is 867-5309. Thank you very much.
Jenny. Yes. Well, that's a really, there are some strong suggestions. The aquarium is certainly worth doing, and I know they're very open to promotion.
Yes, and they are, the fact that they're moving forward with the Great Lakes Interpretive Site that they're building in the former geologic site. That is just the Gorge Discovery Center is becoming a Great Lakes Center, and that is just, finally, these are the things that we're oh yes, okay, we're talking about the Great Lakes.
And I can't tell my tours, I can't do my tours without the story of the Great Lakes. Melting, becoming the lakes, moving the water, going over the edge of the escarpment, the falls being created. The Great Lakes play a role in everything. And with that much fresh water in one place, that's a huge resource.
And that's where you realize just everything in Niagara Falls and the history of Niagara Falls is so interesting because, and we wouldn't consider looking at the Herschel Carousel Museum, you don't realize that is industry. That was industrial. And that was, Niagara Falls was, and the Niagara region was an industrial hub. You have the Erie Canal. And over in Canada, you have Welland and everything else going on. Yes. Come on, let's go. And you have the Great Lakes, and you have all of this, and you have the hydroelectric power being produced at Niagara Falls. So all of this lines up to create just so much industry, and with that industry also came entertainment to relate to that industry. One of the greatest amusement parks that had ever existed, and I'm not being dramatic here, Crystal Beach.
That's all I hear about from people. What was it, the Comet?
It was the Comet, and the Comet is actually at Great Escape over in Lake George. So the original Comet still exists. It's out on the wrong end of New York State, and it's on my bucket list. It's still voted as being one of the top 25 roller coasters in North America, and it's this old steel and wood from the late 40s, and it was built out of the steel of the greatest roller coaster to suffer through, which was the Cyclone. Are you familiar?
Ooh, no.
You familiar with the safety Cyclone, Peter?
No, but if it sounds dangerous, do tell.
So the deal with the Cyclone was built in a time period when I don't know, how do I politely put that this thing could never be built today. It was a steel and wood roller coaster that with a turning corkscrew embankment that would turn you at about 85 degrees entirely on gravity. There were reports of this because there was one, it was in a Philadelphia exposition, and he's like, that's what I want. Okay, I want to build this. And what the guy built him was the Cyclone. They were the terrible triplets. And of them, the one that survived the longest was the one at Crystal Beach, but eventually was demolished in the 40s. What is interesting about the Cyclone is it's one of the few roller coasters where you can look at, and this thing has a body count.
Cool.
It was impossible to ride the Cyclone without serious bruising.
Nice.
And it did this is a little gruesome. There were fatalities relating to the Cyclone was a dangerous roller coaster. So much so, the reason why it ended up being demolished was nobody wanted to ride it. They wanted to watch you rode it one time is almost a dare.
Right.
I challenge you to ride this. But at the same time, the descriptions for it at the time were all of the joys and thrills of stunt aeroplaning with none of the danger. Except it was just as dangerous. So it's really funny. You look back at, people will talk about, oh no, not
people gave their lives for fun.
You are so mercifully free of the ravages of intemperance.
So true.
You are so mercifully free.
But that is one of the craziest things about. And the funny thing is, Crystal Beach entirely exists because of factories. You're killing me
Thanks,
up there
Julian.
in the booth.
That was good.
That one, but that was on the money. I'm not going to talk about the kid that fell out of the cyclone. If we ever have an after-hour show where we talk about all of the weirder, kind of more unsettling stories of Niagara, I'll cover the cyclone in more detail. But one of the things, Crystal Beach only existed because of these factories sending their workers on workers' retreats, and they'd get on the Canadiana, and the boat would take them right over to Crystal Beach, and take them back, and that's why these things existed. They were factory retreats. That's Fantasy Island started off the same way. They were retreats for factory. Factory workers, bring your family, let's go. Then everyone, thousands of people cramming onto a boat to go ride a roller coaster.
Oh yeah.
Eat
in Toronto, where I'm from,
sugar waffles.
I worked on the Great Lakes on a ship that came to St. Catharines and to Lewiston and etc. And that was back in the late '90s. But I researched the history of it. And and after car crashes, that was Tim Horton. That's how they invented Tidbits. Sorry. I know.
We're getting.
That's bad. No, I know.
Yeah,
Thank you, Julian.
Shameful.
So back to Toronto. There were ships that would take you to Lewiston. They would take you. The big one that I want to cover for one of our shows is Olcott. Now, the remnants of a glorious hotel are there in the form of the concrete piers that are still there and some of the foundations, but Olcott was either a day resort or you'd go for a weekend or longer, and you'd come over on a boat from Toronto, and that was very common to Crystal Beach. It was how, like you said, corporate events, church groups. Because we're in Black History Month, I did want to mention this. We're going to do a presentation on that next week. Oh, the kids are happy. We're going to do a presentation on Black history and tourism. I have been working with an organization called Rhodes Scholar for about 12 years, and my area of sort of expertise, if you will, is what happened to those who fled slavery when they got to Canada. Now, people don't know, for instance, Harriet Tubman had a home church in St. Catharines. She's in the register. They have a beautiful monument to her and a bust of her in a garden that they set up. That was her home church. When she delivered people for freedom, she stayed with them long enough to find homes and education and jobs. But also in Western Ontario, if you've ever read the book Uncle Tom's Cabin, the building stands. Uncle Tom's Cabin is in Dresden, Ontario. So we're going to talk a bit about Black history as well. But the reason I sort of delved into that is that there were Juneteenth, which was a huge celebration for the African community. I say African, the Black community, because that's how we refer to it in Canada. And many, many people of the Black community would board boats and come to Lakeside Park in Port Dalhousie to celebrate the Juneteenth event and return. So boats were huge for that in this area. You crossed the lake and you went somewhere fun.
Yes. And going back, I also want to note over here on the American side for Black History Month, please go visit the Underground Railroad Heritage Center.
Yes.
So it's in our train station right on Main Street here in Niagara Falls, New York. It is a wonderful, wonderful museum as well as a community space. It is a wonderful community space. And that is, and they'll tell you all about the story. I actually was privy to seeing it before it actually opened. One of those happened to be in the right place at the right time, and happened to be at the right people that they had just finished it. And so I managed to get inside with actually a few of my other friends. We were all students at Niagara University, and we had the entire, they were just finishing the paint. They were finishing the paint on it. Some things weren't even set up yet. The touchscreens weren't ready yet. Things were all there was some of the interpretive spaces and the the building itself. They had just finished putting all the paint, finished putting up the photos. The touchscreens were still being rebooted and everything. And I was able to spend 2 hours there and just look at everything and see a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, which was really cool. And then to see it, then I went obviously again after it was open and all the interpretive stuff was up and running. And it is the coolest exhibit in Niagara Falls. It was one of the most moving. And my favorite part about the Underground Railroad Heritage Center is the last section of the museum. So the last section of the museum actually covers current events.
Yes.
The idea of everything from modern slavery to current civil rights issues, throughout the world, America, all of that, and it rotates out with whatever's happening in the world currently.
Well, there are more people enslaved in the world today than there were at the height of the transatlantic slave trade.
And that's just it. And this museum really, holds the mirror up in a way. You have to look at yourself, where you're from, and go, oh, okay, like we can, in a way, we can do better. We can do better.
Yes.
And my favorite though is you get to the end, and I didn't buy the shirt because it was sold out. There's two different shirts. One is a Harriet Tubman quote, and it says, "We out."
We out.
And that is like the top seller. If you can find it there and it's not sold out, it's because it's always sold out. And the other one is that museums are not neutral.
Yes.
And I think that is so important from a historical perspective. As we talk, because we talk about a lot of museums here, all museums are built, and it was something I actually saw in Corning. So when I was in Corning back in November, they have an entire section where they were talking about Corning is starting to re-go through its catalog of its glass, and it started annotating going, okay, we were biased in our presentation of this. It's like, okay, well, hey, because you look and there's a section, they're like, oh yeah, we just interpreted and said these are tribal beads and these are that. Like, these were stolen. We're going to admit it.
Yes.
We stole them. We don't really know what they are. We lost the oral history on them, and we did not do our job back then as a museum of what we should have done. And as a lot of museums are starting to do that, I feel like the first one around here really was the Underground Railroad Heritage Center to point people and say museums are tools.
Yes.
And museums actively must make the decision whether they want to, head in the right direction or the wrong direction. And you're seeing that, and a lot of other museums have started now looking at their collections, looking where they came from, having to come to terms with all of this previous history. Cool. And it's absolutely fascinating, and it's eye-opening, and especially here in Niagara Falls where we have a very, elaborate world history and national history, and there's a lot that has happened here with Niagara Falls. Niagara Falls is sort of the last stop. It was the last point before freedom on the Underground Railroad. It was the last point on pretty much most of the Continental Railroads getting into Canada and out. So, and it's, this industry hub and all of these things, all roads sort of led to Niagara Falls, which is why culturally Niagara is such an interesting experience, and why a lot of the things that we take for granted started in Niagara Falls. The Black history, the Niagara movement was Niagara Falls.
Yeah,
the civil rights has very deep roots.
NAACP.
That's Niagara Falls. That's Niagara Falls, and people don't necessarily know that. People in this community don't necessarily know that because they're not reading a plaque stuck somewhere, without these interpretive spaces to show this to people.
Right.
The history does get lost. And one of the things I would, really like to ask our viewers, if you're watching this, if you have stories, either for Black History Month, here in Niagara Falls, or any of, because we're going to cover all history of all cultures, all people throughout the world here in Niagara Falls, because really this is a world destination and a lot of things have happened here. We want to cover that. And if you have stories that you want to share, please contact us. We would love, you can come on the show.
We'd love it.
You could just send us a letter. We can read it. You want to send us a video? We'll play it.
We'll come make the video.
Whatever
you want.
Whatever you want. Because we want these stories to get out there. We want people to hear about these experiences, and at the end of the day, learn something about the Niagara Falls experience that they might not have known before.
Yes. Yes. And that's a connection that you cannot duplicate or replicate or create out of nothing. Any other comments to look at right now? We good?
I think we are good. We have, so I do have a few. Two from Mary. One was that Mary's father-in-law actually moved some of the houses to the Heritage Museum. So there, we have people that are connected to the Amherst Heritage Museum where all those houses were moved.
Wow.
So it's like, there we go. That's what I was just talking about. Like, these are the kind of things. And also, just shout out to the Wild Mouse over in Crystal Beach, which was always a fun ride. That's it. And these are the good memories of Niagara Falls.
Pardon me.
I love these kinds of stories for here in Western New York and over in Ontario and just these.
Well, that's our goal, is to discover the things that we kind of aren't aware of. Like, say North Tonawanda, that when we go to North Tonawanda, we're going to follow that up with a review. That's for the Herschel Carousel Museum. We'll follow up with a review of North Tonawanda, which includes the Benjamin Long Homestead. It involves Webster Street, the Webster Bistro, the Canal Club 62, the Remington. Restaurants that are out of this world. They are really strong and great food.
Watching silent films at the Riviera.
Yes! Oh, when they do the organ. And
I saw Phantom of the Opera.
Oh,
I did.
Man.
I dragged my poor mother to that, and we're walking out of the theater going, the Phantom can't strangle you if you have your arm up like this. It's like
funny.
And then immediately spend the rest of my time at Pulp 716 just draining my money into boba tea because, let's face it, I'm a 20-something and that's what we do.
Well, we're going to let you be a 20-something there. That's good. But other than that, hopefully you've got ideas of things that we can look at. Mary, that was a great suggestion with the village. Definitely in the future, we're going to be covering Porch Fest in Niagara Falls. That will be in May. We'll be giving you more information on that. Our parent company, Niagara's Vox, is actually setting up a main stage at one of the locations with full recording, video and audio, in order that the performers will get a professional quality recording, archival recording that they can use and we can use as well to show the excitement of Porch Fest. But there's lots going on here. And Niagara Falls, like I said, the botanical gardens. I didn't even touch on the floral show house, and that is just up from the Horseshoe Falls, and they have songbirds that are flying around and plants inside. It's a terrarium, if you will, or like a greenhouse. So there's many ways to commune with nature and flowers and plants, even in this cold 18-degree weather.
I'll say. One might even call it a winter garden.
And then they'll tear it down.
Well, I mean, you build it in the middle of the street, that's gonna...
Yep. Put it right in the way.
No, you could always attach a shopping mall to it.
Yeah.
That could possibly go.
Well, shall we say our goodbyes, and Julian will line up our closing video?
No, it's never goodbye. It's only see you next week.
Yes, that's right. Okay, so, ladies and gentlemen, have a great week. Don't do anything we would do. Wait, no, let's not. But we're going to continue to bring Niagara Falls to you, even in the cold weather, and we're going to continue to bring people to Niagara Falls because it's fun.
It is. Bye, everyone.
Have
See
a great
you next
week.
week. It's getting tired. My arm's getting really tired.
We are not amused. We are not amused. Here we go. Good, good.